Hey folks. So I'm just going to do a quick one today. I think it'll be a quick one. Um, just about Metroidvanias. Um, Basically from playing Animal Well and basically it being what I hoped it would be. Um, Especially when I heard that it was a non-combat game. Um, and if you've seen some of my or one of my recent videos, you'll kind of know that that's not it's not necessarily a position that's important to me, but I know from personal game development experience that as soon as you take combat off the table in your game design, try and design a game without combat, um, you often have to be a lot more creative about what is keeping players engaged in that game. So as a non-combat Metroidvania, I was sort of intrigued to play Animal Well, and you know, immediately just wondering what's it going to do to keep players engaged, and is it just going to sort of bog itself down in puzzles, and then that is compounded by the Metroidvania aspect of backtracking and sort of mapping everything and all of that kind of thing. So and basically it doesn't. It's sort of puzzle-ish. I mean, most of what you're doing is puzzling and a bit of sort of twitchy platforming, which actually, I don't love that the platforming is a bit twitchy. Not twitchy in the control sense, but twitchy in the atmosphere is very chilled and spaced out, and gives everything kind of room to breathe. And there's something about the precision platforming aspect that for me doesn't quite gel with that. But it's kind of one of those things that as soon as you have platforming, you've either got to have, it's either got to be precision, or you just don't have platforming at all, because it's just part of the territory, really. So anyway, the reason that I'm really pleased with what it offers, and want to make a point of what that is, or why that's significant, is because I think Metroidvanias have been really stale for a long time, and this is coming not from an attachment to the past, but as someone who I bought Super Metroid on the Super Nintendo when it was out in shops, like when it first came out, and same with Symphony of the Night. I actually bought that as a PlayStation disc back in the day, and they were some of my favorite games back then, and Super Metroid really was a revolutionary design back then. But to me, I've returned to it sort of every few years for a while, and it is, to me, it's diminishingly good. And that's a weird thing that happens with video games that doesn't happen as much with, really great literature or great films or whatever, that a lot of really great video games, and I know it's a not everyone is subjective, it's a subjective thing, but in my opinion, a lot of great video games don't stand the test of time. If you take the nostalgic element out of it, which I always do, Super Metroid has crappy combat and sort of janky controls. The platforming controls are pretty terrible. So it doesn't sort of hold up on a lot of fronts, really. But in terms of structure, it does. But what's interesting to me is that when those other things aren't in place, what is interesting about its structure is like kind of no big deal. But I don't know. Different people place more importance on the historical significance of things, which is a whole rabbit hole you could go down. So my point is really more broadly, there's a million indie devs in the world at this point in history who understand a Metroidvania structure and can sort of just imagine what that would look like in a blank canvas situation, and would have the tools and or the skills and whatever to sort of map that out. And it's really not that difficult to generally, like broad brush strokes, map out like a Metroidvania structure. And so that's kind of part of the problem, is that there are so many out there now, because as a global collective game developers all over the world, there are so many people who understand it and know how to do it, which kind of means that we need to be past it. Like, we need to say what's next then. And I would also guess that that's why it was so long between Metroid installments before Metroid Dread, like that we hadn't had a 2D Metroid for so long. Because they maybe they just didn't know what to do next. Like, how do you evolve the medium? And then Metroid Dread didn't really, or it did very little, I think, to evolve the medium. It just kind of had some stealth sections, which still weren't the major part of the game. So the major part of the game was still the same Metroidvania structure, which sort of just felt a bit played out. So that, if that is the problem, then I would say Animal Well is in part a solution to it. But also Animal Well feels like it's coming from a much friendlier place, that it's not coming from a place where and I don't know. But if I had to guess, it feels like it's coming from a place of not like, this is a problem and I want to find a way to solve it, but more like that the developer Billy Basso just had an idea of like a place and a vibe. It's a game that knows what its atmosphere is, so it feels like it's come from a place of like from a hit of inspiration, of like, I have an idea for a the seed of inspiration is there, and the game kind of organically grew out from that. That's what it feels like to me. But nonetheless, whether it was intentional or not, it kind of does go, well, what are really the necessary parts of a Metroidvania, and do all those necessary parts need to be necessary, and whatever. And so if you compare that to kind of the evolution of roguelikes, roguelikes have done a lot better in questioning that sort of constantly, of like, what are the essential parts of roguelikes, and can we do this without doing this part? And I think that was in large part just to the fact that the Rogue, the original Rogue and all of that is much older, and so you can't, and it's basically not it's a visually archaic medium, like true Rogues. So nothing needed to hang its hat on that. And so there right from the start, there were a lot of things that people were ready to discard, to like go, if we're going to bring this into the modern day, then we can say it's not going to be ASCII art, and it's not going to be this and this, and so that's important. Whereas part of the problematic kind of Super Metroid legacy is that you can just look at that and go, well, if we just update this and this and this, then it just keeps it on a predictably straight trajectory of like better graphics and bigger worlds and more complex things and whatever, and like that's not real innovation. That's just iterating on the same idea. So I think it's going to be interesting. There's not really that much more that I want to say about it, because it's really just like, I think I'm really just here saying like, just play Animal World because it's great and support that kind of innovation. And it's like, that's kind of the best kind of innovation, is innovation that doesn't, I think in this day and age, we all have, and especially in the AI kind of scene, we all have this like suspicion of innovation that feels like innovation, that feels like Silicon Valley, like bullshit. So when we can experience something that feels like it's that kind of organic innovation, it feels, I don't know, to me it feels kind of like a relief, like, oh wow, I can trust this, it's not trying to be like disruptive or whatever. And I mean, I use the word disruptive all the time when I'm pitching projects and whatever, which is fine in that context, but in the context of, like talking to the public about a game, it is one of those words that has all this, it's so loaded with all these negative connotations of like, entrepreneurs that are trying to like push some kind of innovation that we don't actually need, or and I mean, and when it comes to creativity, even the concept of need is so much more ephemeral, right? So, but that's a good thing. So yeah, I think it's really interesting, and I'm hopeful for what Animal World can bring. Like if people, I guess if developers get it, like I think players are already out there getting it. But I think if developers can get it as well, and I don't mean like that we see a bunch of Animal World clones, like wrong answer, but I mean like look at a different approach and look at kind of like evolving the medium, and because like we all know that Metroidvanias are great for a lot of different reasons. So it would be a wonderful thing to see them grow. And I don't feel like people are trying to figure out how to do it and failing. It feels like people aren't even trying, which, if I had to guess, is probably just too much of a nostalgic element in there. So I don't know. For me, it's been really easy, like I said, going back to Super Metroid and going back to Symphony of the Night, which I did a year or so ago, and kind of just being shocked at like the platforming is kind of stiff, but in a way that's sort of a Castlevania thing, is that the platforming has always been a bit more stiff, and for some reason it kind of works in that context. But the combat in Symphony of the Night is so unbelievably terrible, and it's so much of what the game is. It's not like there's some other ways to play it. You just have to bear with this terrible combat like constantly. And so all of what's good about the game, structure-wise, which I would say is the key evolution, one of the key evolutions of that game, or maybe not even evolutions, but one of the things that feels more significant about that game is that it is a place, whereas Metroid is a bunch of alien environments. Symphony of the Night is this one big castle. And so for me, playing something like Metroid Dread, it's like once I've uncovered enough of the map, then it's just like, well, okay, now I have a big map to deal with that I feel lost in, because everything just feels vaguely sci-fi-ish. Whereas in Symphony of the Night, it's like, I remember that this thing is here because this is the turret part of the castle or whatever. And it changes that whole experience, because that's one of the key things about basically all Metroidvanias, is that as you unlock more areas, you're relying on the map more, and you're also relying on your own internal mapping more. So yeah, and so that's the one aspect of Animal World that I think could still use improvement in terms of Metroidvania, what is common to a lot of Metroidvanias. And that is this problem of like, you want a big world to explore, and you want to have a big adventure exploring that world and different biomes in that different world, and different things that you can expect in those different biomes and all that kind of thing. But to me, that's great, and you want that and you need that, but it also becomes tiresome once you open up, you press the map button and you open up a map and you've just got all this visual noise to deal with. So I do wonder if there's some way of doing the opposite, of sort of having a lot, or like doing the exploration and discovering, but then after a while doing a whittling down kind of process, of just kind of like closing off or cutting off places that are, that you're done here, and you're kind of done here forever. And this is a question. It's not a solution, because obviously if you did that, if you kind of like cut down your places, then you would end up with like, here are the key things that I need to do, and then kind of whatever problems the game was throwing at you are at least 50% solved for you, because you're not trying to figure out where to go to do the thing. So that it's not a solution to that problem, but in terms of sort of whittling down that aspect of visual noise, I think that could be something, because it sort of comes back to that principle that I always like to bring my game design back to, which is instead of a thing being about all the things that we can collect and all the power-ups we can add and more and more and more, what can we give the player to do that is actually about eliminating things, of like just cutting back and then getting to the essence of it. And I mean, we need to do that first as the designer. We need to get to the essence of what the thing is. But then if we can allow the player to have that experience as well, of like going, here's a bunch of stuff that is what we designed as the essence of things, but now you as the player can get to your version of that essence of things. So it's kind of the essence within the essence, because that's bringing their subjective experience into it as well. Which now that I say it, actually feels like the point that I was trying to get to. It feels like a nice conclusion, even though it is not particularly related to Animal World. I think as wonderful as that game is, that's all that it's kind of missing for me, is like, great, now can I bring my kind of subjective experience into that to cut back all of this sort of busyness. And for me, the question that I as a designer that I would next pose to myself is like, okay, so what's the immersive sim element? And I don't mean in the traditional immersive sim way. I just mean the element of like, I just use immersive sim as shorthand these days for like the aspect of the player has a lot of ways to solve particular problems, and the tool set that the game provides allows the player to improvise their own solution. Which is not something that you can throw into a game, obviously. It needs to be designed from the ground up to be able to do that. Anyway, so interesting to think about, and play Animal World because it's an amazing game. It's a beautiful game. It's a really handcrafted game. I mean, Billy Basso made his own engine, did all the graphics, did the game design, programming, everything, and you can really feel all the care that's gone into that. So go and check it out, and then demand more from Metroidvanias. All right, so cheers. See you next time.